Countless people secretly mocked and ridiculed me. The whole world regarded me as the #1 wasteful, rich second generation. Simply because I spent billions to buy the complete version of the Tao Te Ching and traveled overseas. Spent a huge sum to bid on the Bodhi tree. Finally bought an abandoned farm at a high price. But no one knew, 3 months later, the global evolution would begin. Foreign enemies would invade in force. Money would become worthless waste paper. Everything I did was to prepare in advance for the coming catastrophe. The complete version of the Tao Te Ching could evolve the method of cosmic visualization. The Bodhi tree could help me awaken 10,000-fold talent. On the farm I bought, a sword platform carrying the Great Luo Sword would be born. By that time, my soul would be invincible and my body like a dragon, able to contend with immortals with a 30 to 70 chance. Simply put, 3 strikes could make an immortal collapse in 7 seconds. At a private port on the outskirts of the city, above the sea, a ferry slowly approached. On board was a giant container. The box was covered with layers of seals. To outsiders, it must contain valuable goods. Half an hour later, the ferry docked smoothly. Dozens of men in black stepped off the ship one by one. The bald leader was tall, with bulging muscles. His gaze cold and intimidating. "Mr. Lu, we lost a few of my men on this trip. When will the final payment be settled?" Within half an hour, I replied with a smile. "The Centipede organization has a good reputation. I naturally won't delay payment." The bald man nodded slightly at me. "With your word, I am relieved. Come aboard with me to inspect the goods. Once confirmed, we can unload." Tearing off the container seals, opening the doors. An ancient tree with its original soil came into view, 10 meters long. Clearly, it had been dug up not long ago. The bald man couldn't help but remark, "I really don't understand the rich spending a fortune on an ordinary tree." I shook my head gently. "This is no ordinary tree. It is the Bodhi tree under which Shakyamuni attained enlightenment." That's right, the stolen Tianzhu national treasure, the Bodhi tree, was exactly what I entrusted the bald man to obtain. He was the leader of one of the top 3 international poaching organizations. As long as the price was right, anything could be obtained. This trip cost me nearly 10 million, but it was absolutely worth it, because I am a reborn person. In my memory, more than 2 months from now on a night, a global mutation would occur and mythology would descend. Monsters and spirits would appear frequently. The world would enter an era of the strong preying on the weak. Some would awaken the body of thunder, controlling lightning. Some would have ancestral bloodlines, with unparalleled talent. Some would grow wings on their backs, soaring through the sky. The Bodhi tree would also transform into supreme divine power. After refining, it could increase talent by billions of times. At that time, 10 million would be no different from waste paper. In my previous life, I learned too late, and was brutally killed. In this life, I was reborn, 3 months before the mutation, to plan ahead, seizing the initiative before others, to reach the peak, soon. The container with the Bodhi tree was unloaded onto a truck. The truck was prepared in advance. I planned to drive it myself. I had made sufficient preparations in the early stage, bought the port, removed the cameras. After all, the Bodhi tree was a Tianzhu national treasure. Once exposed, my billions in assets wouldn't be enough to withstand it. Late at night, at a mountain villa in the northern part of Gusheng where people rarely visited, the Bodhi tree brought back from the port had been planted. At this moment, the phone on the table rang. It was an overseas number. "Mr. Lu, I just got off the plane." A deep voice came from the receiver. "The Christie's pass is secured. Remember to get the item at all costs. Contact me anytime if there are issues," I calmly instructed. Christie's was going to auction, an ancient Chinese book written in ancient script, after appraisal by foreign experts. It was suspected to be related to Laozi's Tao Te Ching. It was unearthed in China 100 years ago, then lost overseas during the wars, and acquired by Christie's. Experts believed it might be a forgery, due to significant differences in the word count and chapters compared to the circulated version of the Tao Te Ching. Its research value was not high, but I knew very well this was the genuine article. In my previous life, after the global mutation, a great power studied it and refined both body and soul to the extreme, able to command stars and communicate with deities. Its effect was no less than that of the Bodhi tree. After a long while, one plan after another emerged in my mind. I had to gather all the divine items before the mutation, to face the crisis, and stay ahead of everyone. At this moment, the phone vibrated, interrupting my thoughts. It was the university class group, discussing the 1-year graduation anniversary reunion. In my previous life, I would have been interested, but now time was tight. The reunion was meaningless. The girl I liked had also faded after being ignored. No need to reply. But soon I realized the reunion was connected to something I urgently needed. After sending the message that I would be there on time, I turned and walked into the villa's fitness area to exercise. There was still over a month left. Some divine items needed to be retrieved personally. The places were dangerous, so I needed a strong body. A few days later in the morning, while eating breakfast after exercising, the living room TV news started. 3 days ago, tourists climbed Mount Tai, claiming to have seen rays of light in the clouds and a heavenly palace appearing. It was identified as a mirage. Small earthquakes were occurring in the Sichuan-Chongqing area. Relevant departments had sent rescue teams. No casualties reported so far. The eastern Taihang Mountains had recently been shrouded in fog. 2 tour groups had gone missing. Experts advised caution when traveling recently. I fell into thought. Perhaps the global mutation had already begun, just not yet noticed. These seemingly ordinary events were chilling upon deeper thought. Perhaps the authorities had already sensed it and were preparing in secret, suppressing matters to maintain stability. At this thought, my sense of urgency increased. With just over a month left, I had to act quickly. At the same time, Manager Zhang of Rongsheng Real Estate called to tell me the contract for the farm I bought on the outskirts of Wuzhou was ready, but the seller had added a last-minute price increase from 20 million to 25 million. I agreed without hesitation. A few tens of millions couldn't compare to the farm's value. Besides, who would care about a pile of waste paper? In my memory, soon a 1,000-year meteor shower would appear over Wuzhou, and the most important meteor would fall on that farm. Inside, it would contain a supreme sword embryo, rare in the world. That was why I urgently wanted this land, to be the first to find it when the time came. After hanging up, I took my phone and sent a message to Lawyer Wang. Have you contacted Longhu Mountain? Lawyer Wang replied instantly. Hello? Mr. Lu, I am working on it, but there are some issues. The Longhu Mountain Taoist priests are hard to communicate with, saying there have been many donations recently, and asking you to wait. 10 million, keep negotiating. Thinking of Longhu Mountain, that was the birthplace of Taoism, rich in mythological significance. After the global mutation, its status rose even further, producing many great figures. I wasn't donating for protection, but for the wordless stele in the temple, which contained a supreme Taoist divine ability. In my previous life, someone dominated the world with this ability. Now no one knew except me. According to Longhu Mountain's rules, large donations may grant access to an exclusive private lay Buddhist devotee sanctuary. I needed to find a way to include the stele first, then take it away. Glancing at my phone, it was almost 9 o'clock. I sped up my breakfast. After cleaning up, I walked to the garage. The garage only had a Mercedes-Benz 2025 latest G63. I wondered what my classmates would think when they saw me driving it to the reunion. In college, I was low-key. My parents followed a frugal upbringing. My classmates thought my family was middle class. Inserting the key and starting, I drove away from the villa, Yunzhong Grand Hotel. At the hotel entrance, dozens of young people gathered. A few had decent jobs through family connections, and split into 2 small groups while chatting. Look, a big car is coming. A girl suddenly shouted, what big car? That's a Mercedes G63. The latest model costs over 4 million. Class monitor Li Hansheng said, never mind the car. Let's go inside. At that moment, the car stopped right in front of them. A young man in his 20s dressed casually stepped out, with distinct features, a handsome face, and an aura of unruliness and fierceness. It's Lu Li no Mistake. His family is average. How can he afford a G63? After everyone recognized him, their eyes were full of shock. In college, Lu Li was low-key. The only thing worth discussing was his crush on Zhou Yunqiang. Now just a year after graduation, he was driving a car worth over 4 million. The male classmates gathered around curiously. Lu Li, is this car yours? I had anticipated this question and nodded in agreement. I didn't want to show off and attract attention, but this was the only car I had. Aren't we all going inside together? Without waiting for their reactions, I walked straight into the hotel. Class reunions usually involved a few things: eating, singing, and catching up on everyone's lives after graduation. Yunzhong Grand Hotel was a top 5-star hotel in Shanghai, with luxurious and complete facilities. The room had everything from drinks, fruits to fine wine. The important figure, the school beauty Zhou Yunqiang, hadn't arrived yet. Most people were chatting after entering the room. The earlier incident at the hotel entrance made some classmates want to ask how I got a luxury car within a year. Some people are still testing whether they can profit from it. The female classmates, led by Li Sisi, directly asked if I had a girlfriend. I only responded politely, but was unwilling to discuss my own affairs. Moreover, I came to the reunion for another purpose. Getting along with old classmates wasn't part of the plan. Li Hansheng opened a bottle of wine and sneered, isn't it just a rented car worth over 4 million? When Li Sisi and the others find out, how will he handle it? He was dissatisfied inside. His spotlight stolen but unable to show it. He could only drink in silence. How do you know Lu Li's car is rented? It doesn't look like it. A male classmate named Wang Zibo said suspiciously. Li Hansheng was about to explain. When his phone buzzed with a message, his eyes lit up. He stood up and gestured for silence. Everyone quiet down. Yunqiang is on her way. Let's order first, she'll be here soon. At these words, the classmates fell silent and hurried to the adjacent dining room to prepare. Zhou Yunqiang was the class beauty and school beauty. Her family's Wuzhou group was famous in Shanghai, a typical rich and beautiful heiress. The goddess in the boys' hearts. No one dared to be late when she was coming. Li Hansheng's mood immediately improved. After all, he was the only one currently in contact with Zhou Yunqiang. At this thought, his eyes were full of pride. When choosing seats, I didn't sit with the wealthier students, but sat next to a male classmate named Chen Song and greeted him with a smile. Chen Song, long time no see, classmate Lu. Chen Song nodded nervously in response. His family wasn't well off, and at gatherings he was basically ignored, always sitting quietly in the corner. Seeing me take the initiative to sit beside him, he was very surprised. And thinking of the luxury car I had just driven, he couldn't help feeling nervous, wondering to himself, we weren't that close in college. I naturally understood Chen Song's thoughts, and my goal in coming to the reunion was precisely Chen Song. After ordering, everyone chatted again. Did you hear? Those two tour groups in the Taihang Mountains have been found. Wang Zibo, who was usually active, spoke first. I also saw the news someone online claimed. Those people seem to have gone mad, saying they saw talking tigers. And others said they found a sea in the mountains. How absurd. How could there be a sea in the mountains? The classmates eagerly discussed recent strange events. The news of the stolen Tianzhu national treasure Bodhi tree. Who would have thought people still steal trees these days? How bizarre, what's that? I heard the Vatican Pope baptized a teenage boy, calling him an angel sent to save the world. I even have a video on my phone. And that ancient book from a while ago, supposedly related to the Tao Te Ching, I heard some fool bought it. Rumored to have cost over 30 million. I smiled slightly. When information was asymmetrical, others couldn't understand my actions. Who could have imagined that 2 months later, the things currently mocked by everyone would reveal their magic? That Tao Te Ching was secured the day before yesterday, probably on its way back to the country. With a creak, the room door opened. A faint fragrance wafted in. Everyone turned their heads. With varied expressions, surprise, shock and admiration, some even showed self-conscious looks. A woman in her early 20s entered, tall and slender with fair, delicate skin, with a high ponytail and a cool temperament, like a moon goddess. Outshiningly Cece and the others. Sorry I'm late, the woman spoke. Classmate Zhou Yongqiong is here. Different forms of address reflected different relationships. The last one was called out by Ji Hanxing. She excitedly stood up to greet her, but just as she was about to approach, her heart trembled, and she involuntarily stepped back 2 paces, because there was another person behind Zhou Yongqiong. Behind her followed a middle-aged man over 2 meters tall, with sharp eyes and an imposing presence. No wonder Li Wenxing was nervous enough to step back 2 steps. Zhou Yongqiong smiled and said, "This is Uncle Zuo. My family worried about my safety outside, so they asked him to accompany me. Classmate Yongqiong, you finally made it. You had us all waiting. Please sit. Please sit." Almost everyone in the room stood up. The identity of the eldest daughter of the Wuzhou group made everyone eager to curry favor. But I remained seated in the corner, casually chatting with Chen Song. I remember your family has an heirloom, an ancient small cauldron. Right. Yes, it's still in my father's chest. What's wrong? Chen Song was startled and nodded. Continuing, classmate Lu. Are you interested in that thing? Yes, I didn't deny it. Finally revealing the purpose of this trip. Attending the class reunion and all that was just a side note for me. What I was truly interested in was Chen Song's family's ancient small cauldron. Although it wasn't considered a treasure, nor would it bring me terrifying benefits after the global mutation like the Bodhi tree, it was however greatly connected to my subsequent series of plans. Very important. Chen Song hesitated upon hearing this. I knew someone once offered 200,000 for that small cauldron, but your father didn't agree. I can offer a higher price. You mentioned during our chat earlier that your father has diabetes, and household expenses are high, so you must be in urgent need of money to get by. Right, but Chen Song still wanted to say something. I raised 3 fingers and said 500,000, and I can give you 300,000 as a deposit right away. After that, I stopped talking and chose to wait quietly. At such times I couldn't be too hasty. The reason I had been so patient earlier was to prescribe the right remedy, figure out others' needs, then make an offer. That was the wisest approach. Chen Song opened his mouth and said, I want to go back and discuss it with my father. Clearly he was shocked by that number, and his family really needed such a sum. I smiled slightly. Then give me your bank account number first. I had Chen Song give me his account number, and immediately transferred 300,000. After doing that, I walked straight out of the room. My goal for this trip was mostly achieved. At this moment I felt my phone vibrate, with 2 messages. The contract for the farm I bought had been signed. The 10 million donation to Longhu Mountain had also been accepted, inviting me to visit when free. Select a lay practitioner sanctuary as a token of gratitude. Seeing these, a smile appeared on my face. Although the process hadn't been smooth, it had ultimately succeeded. Without overthinking, I prepared to head to the parking lot. Luli, but soon, a cool voice came from behind. Zhou Yongqiong had also come out at some point, with Uncle Zuo beside her. I stopped and asked, is there something? I didn't choose to ignore her. After all, this woman was not ordinary. Nothing much. Zhou Yongqiong said softly, a year since graduation. You've changed a lot compared to before. I replied nonchalantly. Likewise, before you would never have spoken to me proactively. Hearing this, Zhou Yongqiong's expression shifted slightly, but she quickly responded with a smile. Who's to say otherwise? For Zhou Yongqiong, almost everyone had revolved around her since birth. In her view, she could ignore others, but no one could ignore her. Just like today, the Lu Li who cared so much about her in college, now had this attitude which made Zhou Yongqiong uncomfortable. I could sense her thoughts, but had no interest in them. So I said, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving. I turned to leave. After the global mutation, I struggled at the bottom for 10 years. experiencing all kinds of harsh things. Such feelings had long faded. Lu. Finally, Jo Young-cheong couldn't control her emotions and directly said, I just want to give you one piece of advice. Live your life well in the coming days. There will be many changes in the future. Everything will become unfamiliar. No longer what you know, miss. But just as she was about to continue, Uncle Zuo beside her stepped forward and silently shook his head. I still didn't stop walking, continuing forward. Lost in thought. It seemed some people had already mastered or even confirmed the coming global mutation. The Zhou family was one of them. And this group might have been secretly preparing and gathering strength all along. From what Jo Young-cheong had just said, I gleaned many things. The Zhou family and the Wuzhou group behind them were extremely mysterious. In my previous life, I only thought it was an ordinary group enterprise. But after the mutation, the Wuzhou group rose rapidly. The Zhou family produced many strong figures that shook the world. I had originally thought the Zhou family relied on the Wuzhou group's resources to achieve this, but now it seemed otherwise. Mysterious forces like the Zhou family were likely not few in number both domestically and globally. I felt no worry or fear about this, because I possessed a powerful advantage that no one else had. That was knowing clearly how events would unfold, where the good things were, where the treasures were, where the opportunities lay. I knew all of them, as long as I could seize all this. What Zhou family? What major forces I could face without fear? So I said nothing, got straight into the car, and drove away from the hotel. Uncle Zuo couldn't help but say helplessly, miss. You revealed a bit too much just now. Jo Young-cheong nodded upon hearing this. It was my loss of composure. After speaking, she returned to that aloof demeanor. Uncle Zuo considered for a moment and said, just received news. For the land the patriarch asked you to buy, someone beat us to one spot. Jo Young-cheong was also surprised. Oh, where? Uncle Zuo replied, the farm on the outskirts of Wuzhou. Jo Young-cheong frowned after hearing this. Never mind. We've already bought enough. The meteorite fall sites are too widely scattered. Missing one plot is nothing. At this moment, after driving out of Yunzhong Grand Hotel, I didn't return to the villa north of the city, but headed straight to another destination. While driving, I received a message from Chen Song, saying the item could be transferred and I could pick it up at my convenience. I immediately transferred the remaining 200,000 to Chen Song. Chen Song was honest and sincere. His whole family was like that. So I didn't worry about him running off. Then I continued driving, recalling recent matters in my mind. To be honest, aside from the Bodhi tree, items like the complete Tao Te Ching from Christie's and Chen Song's family cauldron could have been stolen by hired hands. But I had no such intention. The reason was straightforward. Not everyone was trustworthy. The Centipede organization was indeed efficient, and there was no worry about leaks. But if I kept using them, not to mention the cost, doing too much would easily draw attention, and might even backfire. After all those people operated on the edge of danger, I had to be cautious. With these thoughts in mind, I sped along until I reached a road on the outer ring of the city. I parked beside an antique building, got out and walked to its entrance, looked up at the plaque, which bore 3 powerful, bold, and flowing characters. Jubao Zhai. Stepping through the door, I went to the front desk and said directly, hello. I need to go to the 6th floor. The receptionist, upon hearing this, curled her lips and smiled apologetically. I'm sorry, sir. We don't have a 6th floor here. Without saying much, I pulled a black gold card from my pocket. The receptionist's eyes immediately changed, her tone both respectful and slightly flirtatious. So you're a VIP, so please follow me this way. To outsiders, Jubao Zhai was just an upscale place for dining and entertainment, with high consumption, a private club. But in reality, it held great secrets, being an underground trading post, simply put a black market, where one could find rare items not sold openly. Before long, under the receptionist's guidance, we crossed a corridor and reached an elevator, which only showed the 6th floor. Stepping in, it started and went downward. This 6th floor was underground, not above. After exiting the elevator, the view opened up into a huge space, with only about a dozen people. Of course, aside from the staff, everyone here was a billionaire. Mr. Lu, long time no see. You look even better than before. Suddenly, a middle-aged fat man in a suit approached with a full smile. He was the manager of Jubao Zhai's 6th floor, surnamed Lin. Manager Lin, skip the pleasantries. I got straight to the point. Did you find what I asked for last time? You know Jubao Zhai's capabilities, Mr. Lu. Manager Lin smiled confidently. Don't worry, it's all settled. He made a welcoming gesture, indicating I should sit down first. I chose a private spot by the side. Manager Lin had someone prepare tea first, then left, clearly to fetch the item. Mr. Lu, sorry to keep you waiting. Soon, Manager Lin returned with a tray covered in red cloth. This is it. The seller was very straightforward. I nodded slightly, and without a word, lifted the red cloth. On the tray sat a square object, about 10 inches black all over, exuding an ancient aura, with a ferocious beast carved on top, staring straight at one, radiating an ominous feel. That's it exactly. Identical to what I'd seen in my previous life. Every detail matched. Manager Lin smiled at this. After payment, this item is yours. Don't worry. I took out my phone and transferred the remaining 10 million to Jubao Zhai's account. Seeing this, Manager Lin said, Mr. Lu, not to be nosy, but this thing is sinister. Most collectors would look down on it. Spending 15 million on it seems a bit not worth it. Although this might be a bit blunt, but someone who can be a manager here is no ordinary person. Manager Lin said this from a friend's perspective, wanting to get closer to me. After all, only friends would speak so directly. I laughed inwardly. This seal is called the Ghost Seal. It looks like an ordinary ancient artifact, but it has an astonishing origin. It has a deep connection with the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. In my previous life, if I hadn't been fortunate enough to participate, I would never have known its background. Simply put, this is one of the key keys to opening the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. Buying it for 15 million is a sure win. To enter the mausoleum, you need to collect all the keys. Otherwise, rushing in blindly is a dead end. Now including this ghost seal. I already have 2 keys. The other one is Chen Song's family heirloom small cauldron. I didn't explain much. Thank you for the reminder, Manager Lin. Each to their own. By the way, is there anything new and interesting on the 6th floor lately? Of course there is. Manager Lin's eyes lit up, knowing there was business. He quickly took out a brochure from his pocket. Here it all is, Mr. Lu, take your time. Tell me what you like, and I'll make sure to get it for you. Opening the brochure. Sure enough, there were all kinds of ancient artifacts. Given the reputation of Zhu Baozhai's 6th floor, they must be genuine without fakes. I flipped through for a long time but didn't find anything I liked. I was about to return the brochure when I suddenly spotted a small pagoda on the last page. The small pagoda had 11 layers. Although it had weathered the years, from the high-definition image, it was remarkably well preserved. This small pagoda triggered my memories of an earth-shattering great battle. I had once seen a person unleash power, and the phenomenon within his body was exactly like this small pagoda. You should know that after the global mutation, that person was one of the top powerhouses. Now this crucial item reappeared before my eyes. I asked urgently Manager Lin, "What is this?" Manager Lin glanced at it. After a moment's thought, he replied, "This is called an 1-1, level blood pagoda." The seller said it was blood red when unearthed, and beside it was buried an ancient monk. It was identified to be nearly 2,000 years old. In Buddhist terms, a pagoda is called a floating dwelling. As the saying goes, saving one life is better than building a 7-level pagoda. That refers to a 7-story pagoda. I said, happily, help me contact the seller. Price is negotiable. I know your capabilities. But this seller is a bit troublesome. Manager Lin frowned and explained he was in real estate. Later, his cash flow broke, and he wanted to sell this to raise funds, asking for 20 million. But he recently got a loan from a bank and called yesterday to say he wasn't selling anymore. He wanted to keep it for his collection. My heart sank. I examined it more closely and confirmed it matched the phenomenon of that expert in my memory. After that battle, I had specifically inquired and learned that the phenomenon came from refining a divine object. Merging it into the internal organs could unlock the body's treasure, stimulate potential, and make the organs as tough as divine steel. And in 1-1, level blood pagoda exactly corresponds to the 5 organs and 6 viscera. This was undoubtedly the item. Now that the treasure was so close, how could I miss it? In my previous life, I suffered at the bottom for 10 years, enduring all kinds of humiliation. Now the opportunity was right in front of me. I couldn't give up no matter what. If I didn't seize it now, it would be incredibly difficult to obtain after the mutation. Thinking this, I looked up and said sincerely, Manager Lin, I really fancy this item. Please help me arrange a meeting with the seller. I will surely reward you handsomely. Manager Lin quickly replied, you are a valued guest. Serving you is my duty. Since you've asked, I will do my best. But Mr. Lu, you should be prepared. This seller isn't very sincere. 20 million is a bit high. Others have asked before, but he was unwilling to part with it. I smiled calmly. That's just because they haven't met a buyer like me. The 1-1, level blood pagoda, is too important. That shocking scene is still unforgettable to me. As long as I can get it, what's 20 million? Mr. Lu, wait for my news. Manager Lin saw my determination and nodded, agreeing to handle it properly. Then I got up and left the 6th floor. It was already afternoon when I left Baozhai. There was still one more place to go today. An old city area on the outer ring. On the way, I bought some affordable fruit. Nearly 7 o'clock. The car stopped in front of a bungalow. There was a yard outside the bungalow, visible from afar, with wisps of green smoke rising. Getting closer, I could smell the scent of Chinese herbs. Old man Ge, I've come uninvited again. Pushing the door open, Lu Yuan raised the bag in his hand and smiled. I also bought you some fruit. At this moment in the yard, there was a thin old man about 60 or 70 years old, holding a fan in his hand, constantly fanning the medicine pot before him. After seeing Lu Yuan, he only lifted his eyelids, then focused on brewing the medicine again. He said something without much warmth. I was used to this. After putting the fruit on the table, I came over and took the fan, taking over the medicine brewing. Old man Ge frowned, but ultimately didn't say anything, and lay down on the rocking chair beside him, without any intention of speaking. But Lu Yuan was secretly delighted. Since that day, he had come every day. On the first day, the old man had driven him out, but as time went on, he was later allowed to enter. And now, even giving gifts and helping with work, the old man didn't mind. For Lu Yuan, this was a good sign. At least his persistence had paid off. In fact, he had no relation to old man Jay. He didn't even know him before. The reason he came here and tried to build a relationship was of course with a purpose. He just hadn't shown it yet. At this moment, he was like a kind younger generation, helping the old man brew medicine and do chores. One old and one young one, sitting and one lying. Finally, the old man couldn't sit still anymore. He sat up straight and said, "All right, Xiaolu, the medicine is almost done. You should go home too." "It's fine, I don't mind the time." Lu Yuan smiled and remained seated. This left old man helpless. He continued, "Xiaolu, I know you come from a good family and are a college graduate. Surely you don't believe those wild rumors outside, saying my family are descendants of Gehong. Gehong, also known as Bao Puzi, a famous alchemist in Chinese history. Very renowned. Legend says he was an immortal, but he also had an even more famous relative. One of the four heavenly masters, Geshuan. Sometimes legends can't be trusted, but maybe they are true." Lu Yuan smiled. "Of course I've helped you these days. Not for that. Really." The old man didn't believe. "Really?" Lu Yuan answered firmly, but his eyes casually glanced at a medicine furnace not far away in the yard. The furnace wasn't big, with 3 legs and no lid. About the size of a basketball, but it was clearly an antique, only it was poorly preserved and casually placed. So its patterns were worn smooth, making it impossible to date. To ordinary people, that furnace was worth at most 80 or 100 yuan, but in truth only Lu Yuan knew. This item was extraordinary, another type of divine object. It looked plain and unremarkable, but it was one of the few things that, even before the global mutation, already held profound mysteries, because its true name was the Zi Wu Bu Tian Furnace, used by an immortal for alchemy. As for how Lu Yuan knew, of course because he had obtained it before, and it was because of this item that he could survive for a full 10 years. In the harsh environment after the global mutation, the process of obtaining it was also by chance, and involved many hardships. It was also because of this furnace that Lu Yuan was eventually killed, never able to unleash its true power. It was one of his great regrets. Now was the time to make up for it. But besides the furnace, Lu Yuan had another purpose. Of course that couldn't be said, as that would be too obvious, and would annoy people. He'd inquired about this old man. Though not wealthy, he was stubborn and eccentric. That was why he hadn't tried to solve the problem with money. To deal with someone like this, you had to exchange sincerity for sincerity. "Fine, Grandpa will trust you for now." Old man Ge shook his head and said, but clearly didn't take it seriously. He lay back down. Lu Yuan didn't mind, and patiently finished brewing the medicine. And so, time passed little by little, until it was completely dark, and the medicine was done. "Old man, it's ready. Remember to eat the fruit, it's good for your health. I'll be going now." Lu Yuan got up and walked out of the yard without looking back. This young man, old man Ge, was startled and wanted to get angry, but in the end he muttered softly, not even having a cup of tea. After leaving the old city area, Lu Yuan finally prepared to return to the villa. But the journey was long and he had to pass through the city center. Sitting in the car, he sorted through his plans, while looking at this city full of neon lights, very lively and peaceful, as if it would continue forever. But Lu Yuan knew very well, in just over a month, everything would change. Skyscrapers would collapse, cities would be destroyed, heaven and earth would be completely transformed. The new era would be an opportunity. But for most people, it would also be an unprecedented disaster. Soon it was nearly 10 o'clock, and Lu Yuan finally arrived home. But when he parked the car and walked into the yard, he couldn't help but pause. In the yard, the Bodhi tree stood quietly, under the moonlight. Every leaf shimmered with a faint green glow. Although it had endured over 2,000 years, it still stood strong and vigorous, full of vitality. If you stared at it long enough, you could feel a certain Tao rhythm flowing on it. But aside from that, the Bodhi tree had no other special features. The global changes seemed to be happening quietly, but on a very small scale. To outsiders, it was just ordinary natural phenomena. All the anomalies would appear all over the world, but it would be completely different on that day just over a month from now. Lu Yuan walked toward the villa hall, while thinking to himself, most divine objects would show no abnormalities during this time, so even if outsiders discovered them, they wouldn't take them seriously, or even completely ignore them. But after that day, everything would be different. Of course, there were some things that had various uses even before the mutation, but most of those had probably been collected in advance by mysterious forces like the Wuzhou group. Lu Yuan's advantage was that he had lived through a full 10 years in the new era, with a wealth of first-hand experience, and that was something no one else in the world could match. That was the foundation for staying ahead of everyone else. Returning to the hall, Lu Yuan went straight to the basement. After entering a password on a door, the alloy door opened. The lights inside turned on automatically. There weren't many things inside. Only 3 items: a bead, a worn Taoist robe, a bow. They all looked ordinary, with no special features. Seeing this, Lu Yuan walked in, placed the ghost seal from Jubao Zhai on the table. First he picked up the first item, and gently wiped it. This was a bead, not perfectly round, with some impurities on its surface. If left on the road, no one would notice it. But in fact, only Lu Yuan knew. It was left behind by a monk after his cremation, commonly known as a relic, found in an ancient tomb in the snowy region. Of course, even if someone possessed it, they wouldn't know how to activate it, because this item could only reveal its true divine meaning. After being consecrated by the Bodhi tree, after the global mutation, As for the second item, a patched and worn Taoist robe. This is a congenital spirit treasure. Once worn, it would automatically absorb the power of heaven and earth, not only refining the body, but also warding off all poisons and being immune to fire and water. More importantly, this item had astonishing defensive power. Resistant to lightning, the last item was a bow called the Heaven-Shaking Bow. Legend says it was crafted in imitation of the mythical sun-shooting divine bow. Once drawn, it would automatically gather the power of heaven and earth, forming arrow rains to strike from thousands of miles away. Although its power is not as great as that of the Great Bow, but placed in the present, it is absolutely a divine object. At that time, Lu Yuan saw a strong man holding this heaven-shaking bow and shooting down stars from beyond the heavens, with supreme divine power. And these three items were all obtained by him after rebirth, based on memories either from antique streets or from domestic auction houses, at considerable cost. Because they were basically antiques, they were considered quite good collectibles, and were not cheap, especially that heaven-shaking bow, because it was very well preserved. The price directly exceeded 50 million, but for Lu Yuan, its value in itself could not be measured by money. Perhaps in some people's eyes, doing this was simply wasteful. But how could those people understand his true purpose? The Bodhi tree would awaken innate spirituality and grant 10,000-fold talent. The relic contained the supreme Buddhist divine ability. The pre-heaven vital energy would refine the body, making it immune to fire and water and resistant to lightning. The heaven-shaking bow gathered the power of heaven and earth to kill enemies from thousands of miles away. The complete Tao Te Ching would awaken the cosmic visualization diagram, known as the #1 visualization method in the world. The ghost seal and Chen Song's family heirloom small cauldron were the two most important keys to entering the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. Lu Yuan secretly calculated 6 times. Apart from the last 2 items, each of the others could bring him immense benefits, equipped on his body, enough to deal with any disaster after the global mutation. But it was not enough to open the path to invincibility. Now it was still not enough. The wordless stela of Longhu Mountain, the celestial sword embryo, the 1-1 story blood floating dwelling, Old Man Gei's Ziwu Bushin Furnace, to reach the highest peak. These also had to be obtained, all indispensable. The 10 years of struggle at the bottom in his previous life had already taught Lu Yuan what cruelty meant. He did not want to experience it again, nor was he willing to. So after finishing some recent matters, he planned to leave the city, to plan everything before the mutation fully arrived. Then he turned and left the basement. This underground room was also specially built. No one else could enter except himself. And for the next period of time, Lu Yuan kept preparing, checking for any other gains while exercising his body. When he had nothing to do, he would go to Old Man Gei's house to see if there was anything he could help with. He also met with Chen Song and obtained the small cauldron. The items in the basement were now richer than before. One morning, Lu Yuan had just finished exercising and washing up. While enjoying breakfast, he was thinking, ordinary exercise could only achieve basic fitness. To truly have a superhuman physique, special methods were needed. So the Ziwu Bushin Furnace in Old Man Gei's yard had to be obtained. He pondered, thinking of how to speed up the progress. After all, it was one of the few things that could be useful before the global mutation. This item could lay a solid foundation for him and have all kinds of unexpected uses later on. Ding-ling-ling. And it was at this moment, the phone rang. Lu Yuan picked it up, and his eyes lit up. Hello, is this Manager Lin? How did it go? That's right. The caller was Manager Lin of Jubaozhai's 6th floor. Mr. Lu, it's done. The seller will arrive at 10 o'clock, but I can't say whether the deal will go through. Manager Lin's voice came from the other end. So you'll need to negotiate with him directly. What they were talking about was the 1-1 story blood floating dwelling. One of the things Lu Yuan was determined to obtain. Hearing this, Lu Yuan smiled. Don't worry, as long as he comes, things will be easy. I'll be right there. After hanging up without hesitation, he packed up and drove away from the villa. The seller coming meant he had some willingness, just not much. What Lu Yuan needed to do was to increase that willingness until he was willing to sell the item. Lu Yuan was very confident about this. In a private room on Jubaozhai's 6th floor, 3 people sat facing each other. Lu Yuan was at the head. Manager Lin sat on the right pouring tea. On the left was a middle-aged man in his 60s, with a humble posture, thinning hair, and a somewhat honest-looking face. But those eyes that occasionally flashed with light revealed the shrewdness of a businessman. Let me introduce, this is Mr. Lu, and this is Boss Wan Fuda. After pouring tea, Manager Lin spoke, letting the two get acquainted. But obviously, he had more respect for Lu Yuan, addressing him as Mr., while the other was directly called Boss Wan. Of course, ordinary people would hardly notice the difference. Hello, Lu Yuan nodded. Without wasting words, I believe Boss Wan knows why I invited you here. Of course I do. Mr. Lu has taken a liking to my 1-1 story blood floating dwelling. Boss Wan smiled and continued. Mr. Lu has really good taste. That item has been in my collection for many years. Both its condition and age are top-notch. He kept praising his own collectible, seeming quite proud. Boss Wan, I agree the age is good, but the condition. Manager Lin spoke, Forgive me for being blunt. Generally speaking, pagodas are numbered 7, 9 or 12. Boss 1, yours is 11 stories. To be honest, it's not that precious. Perhaps it's even missing a layer. As a middleman, he shouldn't have spoken at this time. But Manager Lin knew Lu Yuan was determined to get it, and he didn't mind helping. As for that surnamed Wan, although he was also a VIP, he had never bought anything from Jubao Zhai. Even the only item he brought out wasn't sincerely for sale. Manager Lin had long held a grudge, unlike Lu Yuan, from whom he had received substantial benefits. Yu Xiao Lin, you don't understand this. Boss 1 was momentarily at a loss, and couldn't help but want to explain all right. But at this moment Lu Yuan interrupted him. I want your item, name your price. He didn't have much time. He needed to resolve this quickly. Mr. Lu, I haven't said I'm selling yet. Boss 1 started to say something. 25 million. Lu Yuan spoke, knowing the seller's previous asking price was 20 million. So he directly raised the offer. Manager Lin opened his mouth beside him, thinking he had just started to drive down prices. But he could only watch now, unable to interrupt. Mr. Lu, it's not about the price. 30 million, I've kept this for many years. 40 million, Mr. Lu. You see 50 million? Lu Yuan raised the price each time while continuing. This is your last chance. If Boss 1 doesn't sell, I'll leave immediately. He had money, but that didn't mean he would bid blindly. If the seller still hesitated, he would use other methods. Deal. Boss 1 stood up directly. It could be said that 50 million far exceeded expectations, and he understood that if he continued this deal, it would likely fall through. Everyone was smart, knowing when to give in. Mr. Lu, you really have great taste. This floating dwelling will truly shine in your hands. I brought the item. Please check if there are any issues. Boss 1 took out the 1 story blood floating dwelling from his bag and placed it on the table. Now he had completely changed from his previous hesitation, becoming quite straightforward. Even his tone carried respect. His attitude before and after was simply like a different person. Manager Lin shook his head at this. Lu Yuan carefully examined that 1 story floating dwelling, about the size of a poem and very well preserved. More importantly, whether in detail or other aspects, it was exactly the same as in his memory. A good item, no problem. The money will be transferred to you through Jubao Zhai. After confirming, Lu Yuan spoke. Since the transaction was made at Jubao Zhai, doing this also provided a guarantee. Of course. Boss 1 had no objection. After chatting for a bit longer, he found an excuse to leave. Afraid that Lu Yuan might change his mind at the last moment. 50 million. Even with Jubao Zhai's cut, it was still a considerable sum. Mr. Lu, you were too impulsive just now. After Boss 1 left, Manager Lin finally spoke, somewhat regretfully. In his eyes, this so-called 1 story blood floating dwelling wasn't worth that price. He originally planned to lower the price first, and then let the seller make the move. I appreciate Manager Lin's kindness. Lu Yuan smiled and continued, but whether it's worth it or not, I know better than anyone. After the mutation, the 1 story blood floating dwelling would transform into a divine object, to be merged into the 5 viscera and 6 bowels. The benefits were countless. How could it be compared to a mere 50 million? As long as the deal went smoothly, I'm relieved. Manager Lin didn't say much more, knowing that after all, it was someone else's business. Then Lu Yuan didn't stay long either, preparing to leave. But at this moment, Manager Lin seemed to remember something, and reminded him. By the way, Mr. Lu, remember not to go out for the next while. Why is that? Hearing this, Lu Yuan's heart stirred. Could Jubao Zhai also know something? I can't say for sure. At the meeting 2 days ago, the big boss said so. In short, things are a bit chaotic out there now. Many strange things have been happening. I'm sure you've seen them on the news too. Manager Lin said the big boss he mentioned was the behind-the-scenes controller of Jubao Zhai. Thank you. Lu Yuan nodded. The global mutation was getting closer. All kinds of strange things kept appearing, accompanied by earthquakes, tsunamis, fires, and so on. They could originally be explained by natural phenomena, but recently they had become too frequent. He saw them on TV every day. He thought only he cared. But now it seemed some upper-class people were also aware something was wrong. Of course, unlike them, Lu Yuan knew exactly what was going to happen. Without saying more, he drove away directly. After obtaining the 1 story floating dwelling from Jubao Zhai, there was only one more thing to do in the city, which needed to be handled quickly. Lu Yuan drove while thinking. Both of these required him to retrieve them personally. There was still a month left. If he delayed further, it would certainly be too late. But when Lu Yuan arrived at Old Man Gay's house and was about to walk into the yard, he heard a loud argument. No matter what you say, the child must go to No. 2 middle school. I married into your family and slaved away for over 10 years. Now I have just this one request. If you don't agree, I'll come and make a scene every day. It was a woman speaking, very loudly, like a shrew cursing in the street. And when Lu Yuan tried to listen more closely, the yard gate opened and a middle-aged couple walked out. The man looked a bit like Old Man Gay. No doubt they were father and son. As for the woman, the answer was obvious. They only glanced at Lu Yuan, without saying anything, and left on their own. Seeing this, he didn't ask, and walked straight into the yard. Old man, I'm here again. Not far away, Old Man G's face looked a bit grim, but upon seeing Lu Yuan, it softened slightly. He said directly, Xiao Lu, watch my medicine for me. Without waiting for a reaction, he walked into the room. Lu Yuan smiled and began to tend to the medicine furnace. The Ziwu furnace he needed was still piled in the corner. After a long while, old man Ge finally came out of the house, holding a passbook in his hand, with a furrowed brow, as if facing some difficulty, but he didn't speak. He came to Lu Yuan's side. Xiao Lu, I've lived for decades, and I know there's no such thing as kindness without reason. You've been coming to help every day for a while now. You must have something to say, just say it. Lu Yuan did not hesitate, and spoke directly. I have a fondness for collecting antiques. To be honest with you, old man, I've taken a liking to your medicine furnace. I hope you can part with it. We can discuss the price. Since I've already spoken, there's no need to hide it anymore. I don't really care about the money. But the old man shook his head and took out the Ziwu furnace. This is a family heirloom of mine. I don't know how many years it's been. I wouldn't give it to anyone else. But since you want it, take it. Although we haven't known each other long, he could tell this young man was decent. Otherwise, would an ordinary person be so patient, coming here every day, just to help an old man? That would be impossible. As for money, he was indeed short of it. But he really didn't care that much. Thank you, old man. Lu Yuan nodded upon hearing this, knowing that if he offered money, the other party wouldn't accept it. But he understood the principle of reciprocity. So after a moment's thought, he said, I know you have a granddaughter who just graduated from elementary school. Are you planning to send her to Gucheng No. 2 middle school? You heard that. Old man Ge nodded. Yes. No. One middle school has better educational resources. That's what my daughter-in-law wants. But our family doesn't have a household registration in Gucheng, so it's difficult. It's difficult because you haven't found the right person. Why not ask me if I have a way? Lu Yuan smiled. What, you have connections? The old man was startled, knowing that this kind of school usually required connections to get in. Not that I have money. Old man Ge sighed upon hearing this. He really didn't want to accept it, but he had no way to deal with his daughter-in-law. Finally, he could only stand up silently and walked back into the house. He handed an ancient book to Lu Yuan. This is another family heirloom. It's said to contain methods for alchemy and decoction. I've studied it for many years but couldn't understand it. I wanted to pass it to my son, but in today's society, traditional Chinese medicine and such have fallen behind. If you're interested, you can take it too. Then I thank you, old man. Looking at the ancient book in his hand, a smile appeared on Lu Yuan's face. That's right, it recorded the alchemy techniques of Immortal J, and to truly make good use of the Ziwu furnace. This ancient book was absolutely indispensable. It was also one of his goals. The reason it wasn't useful now was because the mutation hadn't started yet. Once the new era arrived, it would have unexpected uses. I should be thanking you. Old man Ge waved his hand and sat down to tend to the medicine. The old and the young chatted a lot. Of course, Lu Yuan was mainly the listener, and before leaving, he turned back and said one more thing. Old man, if you need any more help in the future, you can contact me. He had left his phone number before. The reason he said this was also to build a good connection. There was another point, that perhaps they would cross paths again in the future. If possible, he could lend a hand. Soon, Lu Yuan drove away, going straight home without stopping anywhere. Next, he would obtain the last 2 items. But of course, before that, he needed to prepare. The mutation was getting closer. Just as Manager Lin had said earlier, it was chaotic outside. He needed the ability to protect himself. After returning home, Lu Yuan first placed the 1-story floating dwelling in the basement, then filled a basin with clean water, finally placed the Ziwu furnace on the table. The furnace was ordinary, looking very old, especially on the inside. If it were an ordinary person, they would definitely try to clean it. But Lu Yuan, upon seeing those residues, had an irrepressible smile in his eyes. The Ziwu furnace was used by Immortal Ge for alchemy, and after each use, some essence would remain in the furnace. And although these essences had gone through 1,000 years, they would still be effective. He just needed to dissolve them with a certain amount of clean water, then pour it into water, and soak his body in it to refine his physique. Strengthening his body relied precisely on these elixir essences. And this was one of the few things Lu Yuan knew that could work on the body before the global mutation. With it, and as long as he succeeded, by the time the mutation came, he would gain even greater benefits. At this moment, he didn't say much. Following the familiar method, he dissolved those elixir essences with clean water, then filled the bathtub with water. When it was ready, he poured the water from the furnace in. At this moment, the water emitted a faint fragrance, looking extremely mysterious and special. After all, Immortal Ge was a legendary immortal. Now he could begin. Lu Yuan took a deep breath. Without any hesitation, he submerged his entire body in it. Even his head was covered. And tonight was his first night of transformation. In the room, Lu Yuan was completely soaked in the bathtub. His skin turned blood red, as if filled with blood. And as time passed, the faint purple glow in the water also began to fade. And during this process, black impurities emerged, floating on the water's surface. He knew that was because the elixir essence had entered his body and removed the impurities to gain greater benefits. He had to endure this process for a long time. So much so that Lu Yuan sometimes had to expose his mouth and nose to breathe. Finally, after 2 or 3 hours, he stepped out of the water directly. Sizzle, sizzle. At that very moment, Lu Yuan's entire skin seemed to be released. White steam emerged from his pores. One could imagine how hot his skin was at that moment. Not only that, he gave a slight twist, and a crackling sound came from inside his body. That was his muscles and bones after being greatly strengthened, resonating with each other. After wiping off the residue with a towel, he stood in front of the mirror. Lu Yuan clenched his fist slightly. His finger joints cracked. The muscles on his upper body became more solid and thick, streamlined like a sculpture. Swinging his arm, it was very fast, and so powerful, that it made a breaking sound through the air. Not bad, but I wonder how effective it is. Seeing this, Lu Yuan was startled, and walked straight to the gym. He prepared a 500-pound barbell for himself. Surprisingly, he could lift it with one hand. Although it was a bit strenuous, he succeeded. 500 pounds with one hand. Then my strength definitely exceeds 1,000 pounds. That is half a ton, Lu Yuan calculated, and was somewhat surprised. Half a ton of strength. If that hit a person, it would be devastating. Then he tested his speed, 100 meters in 5 seconds, and his hearing, reaction time, and eyesight. All had undergone huge changes from before, already reaching or even exceeding human limits. If it were an ordinary person, they would first panic then feel joy at such changes. But Lu Yuan was different. He had experienced the new era, so his emotions didn't fluctuate much. It was worth all this effort. My current physique, Lu Yuan thought, and assessed his abilities. That's right. After the global mutation, those who gained superpowers were collectively called Awakened Ones. And Awakened Ones were also divided into different levels based on strength. The first level was called the initial stage, with a total of 9 phases, 9 being the highest. Lu Yuan's assessment of his current strength was close to the first phase of the initial stage, but this was still far from enough. He knew that the better the foundation built before the mutation, the more benefits he would gain later. Then Lu Yuan turned his gaze to the side. The Reborn furnace still contained some elixir essence, enough for about 2 uses, he estimated. If he used it all, he could probably match a true Awakened One at the initial stage. Of course, only in terms of physique, besides a powerful body. Awakened Ones sometimes also gained unique abilities, but for Lu Yuan at this stage it was already enough. Without overthinking, he started exercising again, to adapt to this new body. Moreover, absorbing the elixir essence couldn't be done continuously, otherwise it would be hard to bear. So in the following days, while exercising and adapting to his body, Lu Yuan also began preparing his plan to leave Gucheng. One day, outside the villa, a shadowy figure flashed back and forth, so fast that only a high-speed camera could capture it. The next moment, the figure appeared in front of a giant tree. Without any warning, a punch came down, crack. In an instant, the tree that required 2 people to encircle split into pieces, then fell straight down. This punch could probably kill an ox outright. With that speed, he had likely surpassed human limits. Lu Yuan withdrew his fist, a satisfied smile appearing on his face. At this moment, his fist showed no change from the punch. His skin was smooth and gleaming. After obtaining the Reborn furnace, the results were also surprising. Now his strength had reached dozens of times that of an ordinary person. His hearing, vision, nerve reaction time, and even the toughness of his skin had all gone beyond the realm of ordinary humans. More importantly, if you paid close attention, you could still detect a faint fragrance emanating from Lu Yuan's body. Though subtle, it was indeed present. His body would emit a faint fragrance, and after death, his flesh wouldn't decay. This condition was recorded in ancient texts. As the flesh-achieving sagehood, Lu Yuan thought of this level, and understood that after many days of refinement, this flesh-achieving sagehood was only the initial stage. To progress further, he had to wait for the global mutation, because at that time, heaven and earth would change. Some people could unlock the body's treasure vault, fully unleashing human potential, and advancing further to possess mythical power. According to Lu Yuan's understanding, the global mutation was essentially some kind of evolution. Mountains, rivers, humans, and animals were all included. In short, the whole world was entering an era of the strong preying on the weak, survival of the fittest. Those who could seize the opportunity would soar. Of course, those who couldn't adapt would ultimately be eliminated. That was the cruelty of the new era. But now Lu Yuan had initially succeeded in his layout, using the elixir essence in the Reborn furnace. He had gotten ahead of everyone. When the new era arrived, he would gain an unparalleled advantage. Next, he had to obtain the last 2 items. It was now August 1st, meaning there was exactly 1 month left. Time was tight. He needed to hurry. Lu Yuan muttered to himself and reviewed his plans once more. Most of the preparations before the mutation were done. There was still the wordless stele and the celestial sword embryo, both indispensable. Then, according to his past life memories, he would look for some other opportunities. Otherwise, even knowing where they were, he couldn't get them. But Lu Yuan already had a plan. He just needed to execute it step by step. Reborn for 3 months, plus his current financial resources, he could still accomplish these things. Without further ado, after returning to the villa, Lu Yuan showered and packed everything up, preparing to set off early the next morning. As for the first target, it was naturally the farther away Longhu Mountain, and now he was full of confidence. With his current state, as long as he didn't encounter powerful weapons, he could roam anywhere. Longhu Mountain, the birthplace of Taoism. Here there were towering mountains, dangerous terrain, wreathed in clouds and mist, filled with mythological overtones. Legend says the founder of the orthodox way, Zheng Daoling, one of the 4 great heavenly masters, once refined elixirs here. On the day of completion, dragon and tiger phenomena appeared, hence the name Longhu Mountain. There were 3 famous scenic spots on Longhu Mountain: the Heavenly Master's Mansion, the Orthodox View, and the Supreme Qing Palace, all of which had Taoist priests. But in terms of influence and fame, the greatest was the Heavenly Master's Mansion. At the foot of the mountain, 4 or 5 people in Taoist robes gathered. Among them was an old priest with white hair, dressed in a red robe standing at the front. In Taoism, the color of the robes could distinguish seniority and status, and red was second only to purple. This old priest was the contemporary Heavenly Master's junior disciple, Yu Yang Taoist. The other few were all in simple blue Taoist robes, belonging to the younger generation. Normally, Longhu Mountain was a scenic spot, even on non-holidays. Tourists would come in an endless stream, but today, there were none. The reason was that, today the Heavenly Master's Mansion was receiving a group of important guests, so they had specially closed the mountain for the day. "Master, it's almost 10 o'clock. Why haven't the guests arrived yet? Did you misremember the date?" Seeing no movement yet, he couldn't help but whisper. In Taoism, there were seniority distinctions, but not many rules, so the young Taoist dared to speak this way. After all, he knew his master was already over 90. Don't worry, don't worry." Yu Yang Zhenren smiled and told him not to worry, because he had calculated that the time should be about right and there shouldn't be any mistake. "Master, look." At this moment, a sharp-eyed Taoist spoke up, pointing ahead. Everyone looked up and saw a bus appearing in that direction. It slowly parked to the side, and 5 or 6 people got off. These people ranged from 30 to 50 years old, but all of them had excellent bearing, dressed in fine clothes, clearly from wealthy backgrounds. "Welcome all benefactors to our Longhu Mountain Heavenly Master's Mansion. Here this old Taoist once again thanks all benefactors for their donations. Today I will." Yu Yang Zhenren stepped forward to greet them, and bowed slightly. It turned out these were all wealthy donors from recent times, because they had reached a certain amount. Therefore, you may come to Longhu Mountain to select a practice venue for lay practitioners. No wonder the Heavenly Master's Mansion needed the contemporary Heavenly Master's junior disciple to personally come out and receive them. "Zhenren, you are too kind. We lay people are truly ashamed. Junior Lu Qing, you can call me Xiao Liu." A fat man with oily hair quickly stepped forward carrying a briefcase, speaking as if he had prepared this speech on the way. The other wealthy people glanced at him with contempt, but outwardly remained composed, and all came out to greet him. Everyone knew on the bus that the Taoist receiving them this time was of high seniority, so even they didn't dare to be presumptuous. They say that when wealth and status reach a certain level, the more one believes in certain things. The wealthy people before them were exactly that kind. "The time is about right. Zhenren, can we go up to the Heavenly Master's Mansion now?" Director Lu spoke, wanting to try the vegetarian meal of this Taoist birthplace, and soak in some of that immortal aura. As for the other wealthy people, they naturally felt the same way. "It seems one more person hasn't arrived." The young Taoist beside him opened the register, and counted again, continuing, "Indeed, one person is missing." This made the wealthy people pause slightly, and then show signs of discontent. Usually people waited for them, now they had to wait for someone else. But seeing Yu Yang Zhenren still standing there, they couldn't say anything. After an awkward wait, a black SUV appeared in their view. A young man got out. He didn't hesitate, and walked over apologetically. "Taoist, I drove from Gucheng, so there was some traffic along the way." The young man was Lu Yuan, who had driven from Gucheng. "No matter, as long as you're here." Yu Yang Zhenren didn't mind. After all, it hadn't delayed them too long. Then he walked at the front, leading everyone up the mountain to the Heavenly Master's Mansion. This made some of the wealthy people worried. After all, this old Taoist was over 90. Could he really climb the mountain? As it turned out, although Yu Yang Zhenren was old and looked decrepit, his stamina was remarkable. Walking up from the foot of the mountain, for over an hour, he showed no signs of fatigue. His eyes remained clear. In contrast, the wealthy people led by Director Lu were all panting heavily, constantly drinking water. Even the younger Taoists' faces were slightly pale, clearly also tired. "Benefactors, since there's still time, why not rest for a while?" Yu Yang Zhenren suggested stopping. This naturally met with the agreement of most people present. They all collapsed to the ground, clutching their chests. But soon the old Taoist's gaze shifted slightly, because he saw Lu Yuan not far away, still standing tall, composed and relaxed. Almost no different from when he was at the foot of the mountain, as if climbing for so long meant nothing to him. Was it because he was young and physically fit? No, that shouldn't be the reason. Yu Yang Zhenren glanced sideways. Having spent so many years on Longhu Mountain, he had seen countless people climb, but never anyone like Lu Yuan, completely unfazed. Although he found it a bit strange, he didn't ask further, and stood still resting with his eyes closed. Lu Yuan naturally also noticed the old Taoist gaze, and thought to himself after the mutation. Longhu Mountain was one of the few famous mountains that produced great figures early on and established themselves in the new era. Several old Taoists later became unfathomably powerful. It seemed they too were prepared, like this Yu Yang Zhenren, over 90 years old, yet with better stamina than young people. Ordinary people could explain it as a Taoist master of high virtue. But in reality, it was not that simple. He knew very well. Perhaps there was an immortal's inheritance, but because heaven and earth were suppressed, it had never been able to manifest. But after the mutation, it would have a huge effect, especially for old Taoists who had practiced for many years. They could immediately accept that mysterious power. In ancient times, there were pre-Qin alchemists who could refine elixirs and cultivate. With all kinds of mysterious methods, those who inherited these methods in modern times would naturally be able to do the same once heaven and earth were unsealed. In other words, the true power of these old Taoists was sealed. When the mutation began, that would be the day of their unsealing. Just like certain figures he had encountered in his past life, who after the new era began, could rapidly grow powerful in a short time. Lu Yuan felt some admiration and envy for this, but only that. After all, someone like Yu Yang Zhenren had been practicing for how many years, while he only needed to prepare for a few months in advance. Benefactors, have you rested enough? After a long while, Yu Yang Zhenren opened his eyes and looked at everyone with a smile. Yes, Zhenren. Director Lu was very eager and answered directly. Seeing this, Yu Yang Zhenren nodded and led the way. We have arranged the vegetarian meal at the Heavenly Master's mansion for 2 in the afternoon. What do you all think? Everyone expressed no objections. They had been sitting for a long time, then climbed the mountain. Their stomachs were churning. Eating later was fine. You can first look at the catalogue. There are the orientations and environments of several lay practitioner shrines above. At this moment, a young Taoist took out several booklets and handed them out one by one. Lu Yuan also received one. He looked at it while walking. The information was detailed, with multiple locations, each with different positions and scenery. Simply put, a lay practitioner's shrine is a place within Longhu Mountain that belongs to oneself, similar to renting a house where you could live, usually for 10-year terms. But you couldn't move the items inside, because they belonged to the Heavenly Master's mansion. Most people made donations and chose a lay Buddhist temple to build good relations with the Taoists of the Heavenly Master's mansion. Of course, for the more superstitious, it was also for some psychological comfort. Ordinary people might think it foolish, but for the wealthy, it was different. These lay practitioner sanctuaries are all excellent, with pleasant scenery, suitable for leisure vacations. Not bad. You could even discuss business here when free. I think we should choose a place close to the Heavenly Master's mansion. The wealthy people discussed, all feeling it was good. After all, Longhu Mountain was a tourist destination. The scenery was naturally much better than in big cities. Therefore, they were all satisfied with the arranged lay Buddhist practice venue. The only question was which one to choose. Director Lu thought they should choose a place close to the Heavenly Master's mansion, to soak up some immortal aura. At this moment, Lu Yuan spoke up. Could I see them in person? Of course. Benefactors, follow me, Yu Yang Zhenren said, then led everyone along Longhu Mountain. Visit each lay Buddhist practice site one by one in accordance with the route, with young Taoists providing explanations along the way. These were all built by the Heavenly Master's mansion, with all necessities for clothing, food, and shelter. Most importantly, the environment was quite good, and each dojo had some Taoist scriptures, which could be read in one's free time. While inspecting the sites in person, the wealthy people began making decisions. Freely choose their lay Buddhist practice centers. For the next 10 years, they could come and go freely, and also have the opportunity to converse with the old Taoists. This was normal. After all, everyone present had spent a considerable sum. Everyone had made their selection. Only Lu Yuan remained undecided. Xiaolu, make your decision quickly. Look at the time. I think that Qingshan Dojo is very good. Director Lu couldn't help but speak. The other wealthy people also nodded slightly, feeling he was too indecisive. In essence, all lay practitioner monasteries are largely similar. There was nothing to hesitate or struggle over. It was only a matter of distance from the Heavenly Master's mansion. Now everyone was hungry, wanting to eat earlier. But Lu Yuan didn't answer. After a moment's thought, he turned and said, Yu Yang Zhenren, on Longhu Mountain. There's also a place called Xiaoyaoju. Could you take me to see it? In his past life memories, of course he had only heard of it at that time, but now Lu Yuan had visited many places without seeing it, so he could only try Xiaoyaoju. Yu Yang Zhenren frowned upon hearing this, and kindly reminded him, Benefactor, we do have such a place on Longhu Mountain, but it's somewhat remote, and has been unkempt for years, overgrown with weeds. Therefore, this place is not registered as a lay Buddhist practice center. Perhaps Benefactor should look again. It's fine, please take me to see it. Lu Yuan shook his head. In the end, Yu Yang Zhenren nodded in agreement. After all, they were guests, and had spent so much money, such a small matter was no problem. Director Lu and the other wealthy people exchanged glances, but didn't say much, and followed along. In their hearts, they had already decided. If Lu Yuan still didn't make a decision, they wouldn't accompany him any longer. Xiaoyaoju was indeed somewhat remote. After walking for a full half-hour, they could faintly see a very simple wooden cabin. In the overgrown area, over the years with few visitors, and no pruning, thorns were everywhere, with jagged rocks, especially the uneven path beneath their feet, requiring caution with every step. Otherwise, it was easy to trip and fall. Too desolate. Could there be snakes, ants, or poisonous insects? Don't scare me. Let's go. These wealthy people were all successful, used to a life of comfort. and were all growing impatient. But Lu Yuan was different from the others. He continued forward, with steady steps, approaching the wooden cabin. He looked around carefully. When he saw a direction stone tablet hidden among the weeds, his eyes lit up. He crouched down and touched it. The stone tablet had no writing, and its age couldn't be determined. But he could tell it was extraordinary, for a very simple reason. His physique had been refined by the elixir essence, making him exceptional in every way, standing here for many years, through wind and rain, yet showing no signs of damage. This was definitely the wordless stellar he was looking for. Without any hesitation, Lu Yuan immediately said, "Genren, my lay practitioner Dharma Center will be this place." Before Yu Young Genren could answer, Director Lu and the others looked at each other upon hearing this, clearly surprised. "Xiao Lu, you want this place?" "Yeah, too rash. That Qingshan dojo was much better. He's young after all. This place is too remote, and far from the Heavenly Master's mansion. The name Xiao Yao Ju sounds nice, but it's too desolate here. Nearby there is not even a water source. Also, that wooden cabin is basically incomparable to what they chose before. If it were me, I probably couldn't even last one night there." Finally, Yu Young Genren also spoke. "Benefactor, you donated 10 million to Longhu Mountain. You can choose a better place." "No need. Genren, this is the place." Lu Yuan shook his head with a very determined expression. He had come for the wordless stele from the beginning. Now that his goal was achieved, it was clearly impossible to give up. Since the benefactor has decided this old Taoist will have it registered, Yu Young Genren didn't say much more. He had his junior Taoist record it in the register. After affixing the special seal of the Tianxi mansion, Xiao Yao Ju would belong to Lu Yuan for the next 10 years. But Lu Yuan didn't care. 10 years, it was already past August. In less than a month, heaven and earth would change. Whether this would still be valid by then was questionable. But as long as he got the wordless stele, it was fine. After Lu Yuan confirmed his lay Buddhist sanctuary, everyone headed to the Heavenly Master's mansion. As for the wordless stele, he wasn't in a hurry for now. After all, such a stone wouldn't attract attention. But on the way back, Director Lu and the others came over to advise him, saying he was too impulsive to choose Xiao Yaoju. That place was desolate and unkempt, and importantly, it was quite far from the Heavenly Master's mansion. He had definitely lost out. Lu Yuan just smiled at their advice without explaining. The wordless stele contained a supreme Taoist divine ability. How could they understand? Not long after, everyone entered the Heavenly Master's mansion. The vegetarian meal had already been prepared. After Yu Young Genren led Lu Yuan and the others to the dining hall, he took his leave. It was now mealtime. So the dining hall had many Taoists in groups of 2 or 3, quietly eating with their heads down. Most Taoists had precepts. However, the Tianxi mansion of the Zhengyi Dao sect does not prohibit meat. So there was meat in their bowls too. Lu Yuan and the others lined up, took their meals in turn, and found a place to sit. After being tired for most of the day, everyone could finally sit down and rest. But since they were all business people and had gotten to know each other along the way, they soon started chatting. "President Wang, how many days are you planning to stay on Longhu Mountain?" "Probably just 2 or 3 days. I have a business deal to discuss in a few days. I might go to Mount Tai for a visit. Mount Tai is a great place, the foremost of the 5 great mountains. Let's go together then." "Sure. Welcome, welcome. President Wang, don't you know? Mount Tai is now closed to visitors. No one is allowed in." Director Liu also spoke, in a low voice. "I heard that a couple of days ago on Mount Tai, tourists saw the Heavenly Palace again. Not only that, it's said that at night a group of ancient people appeared, standing at the peak of Mount Tai, as if performing some ritual." "A ritual? Is that true? How come I don't know? Is it fake?" Someone asked, "Wasn't it previously debunked, saying it was just a mirage? Why would I lie to you? I have a video." Hearing this, Director Lu took out his phone to show everyone, but soon he frowned and couldn't help saying, Strange. It was on my phone this morning. How is it gone? It must be fake. I've climbed Mount Tai several times and never seen any Heavenly Palace. Or ancient people, not necessarily. I've heard that many strange things have been happening both domestically and internationally recently. Right, Mount Jahua, you know." Someone online revealed that at sunrise, every day you can hear chanting. I wouldn't know about that. Talking about these things got the wealthy people interested, and they shared what they knew. The Taihang Mountains, the Hengduan Mountains, the Qinling Mountains, and even the Kunlun Mountains. Many famous mountains had strange occurrences. Some had earthquakes. Some had rays of light. Some had been snowing since last month and hadn't stopped. Even the villagers living at the foot of the Qinling Mountains could hear beasts howling all night long every night, howling through the night, but no one knew the reason. However, one thing everyone knew, they hadn't made big news online, seemingly controlled. So it was guessed that Director Lu's video had also been blocked. Lu Yuan, who sat nearby, listened quietly. He knew this was the prelude to the mutation. The city might not feel it, but many famous mountains and rivers, especially those with mythological legends, were all changing quietly. Of course, this was just the beginning. On September 1st, a mutation would affect every person in the world. Fortunately, he had prepared for everything and wouldn't be caught off guard. "Benefactor, may I sit here?" Just then, a gentle voice came to Lu Yuan's ear. He looked up and saw a young Taoist. The young Taoist was very young, seeming only 17 or 18. with a Taoist bun and a gentle expression. Holding a plate of food, Lu Yuan nodded. Thank you. The young Taoist sat down across from Lu Yuan, but didn't eat. I heard that you, benefactor, have chosen the carefree abode as the lay practitioner shrine. Today Longhu Mountain was closed to receive several distinguished donors. The Heavenly Master's mansion, knowing Lu Yuan had chosen Xiaoyaoju, was only natural. That's right, Lu Yuan answered, waiting for him to continue. That's not a good dojo. The young Taoist smiled. I stayed there a few years ago. The roof leaked and there were wild animal cries at night. Aren't you afraid benefactor Taoism cultivates the mind? I'm a worldly person, but I know that the more extreme the environment, the better for cultivating immortality. Lu Yuan made up a casual excuse. He wasn't going to live there permanently, so there was nothing to worry about. Moreover, with his current physique, tigers, leopards and wolves couldn't even get close. What you say is reasonable. The young Taoist nodded upon hearing this, seeming to agree. But he didn't speak again until after finishing his meal. This humble one is Chunyang. With a slight bow, he turned and left Chunyang. Lu Yuan's heart stirred, and his expression shifted slightly. He represented the young heavenly master of Longhu Mountain. He hadn't expected to meet such a figure. Lu Yuan quickly calmed his emotions and chuckled softly. In his past life, he was just a small character, while the young heavenly master of Longhu Mountain was one of the most famous young strong figures in China, with astonishing strength, a great figure he could only look up to. But in this life, everything was different. Without another word, he ate quietly. When he was done, he stayed overnight at the Heavenly Master's mansion with the others, but under his strong request. He would spend the night at Xiaoyaoju, because only then would he have enough time and means to completely obtain the wordless stele. At night, dark clouds churned, hiding the stars and moon. At Xiaoyaoju on Longhu Mountain, Lu Yuan walked out of the wooden cabin. He checked the time. Almost midnight. Everything around was pitch black, with barely any light. But this was nothing for Lu Yuan. His physique had been transformed, and his strength far surpassed ordinary people, though he couldn't see as far as in daylight. It wasn't much worse, and by focusing his eyesight, even the insects in the grass couldn't escape his notice. Almost time, Lu Yuan murmured to himself, looking toward where the wordless stele was. Tonight he would move it away, and put it in his car. There was no help for it. Longhu Mountain had rules. Many things couldn't be taken away. Although the wordless stele currently looked like just a stone, he still didn't want to take risks and attract attention. Then Lu Yuan walked to the stele. This wordless stele came up to about knee height, with a very smooth surface. He estimated it weighed at least 300 to 400 jin. An ordinary person definitely couldn't lift it. But for him, it was easy to pick up. Even with one hand, it didn't feel heavy. Next was to carry it down the mountain. As an old saying goes, it's easier to go up than down, especially while carrying several hundred jin. Even for a few strong men, they would need to walk carefully along the mountain path. Otherwise, accidents could easily happen. But with Lu Yuan's personality, he clearly wasn't going to take the usual route. It's time for this physique of mine to show its worth. Lu Yuan smiled. He found a few vines, tied the stela to his body, observed the surroundings. Then almost without hesitation, he bent his legs and leaped high, jumping down from a large rock. Where he landed, the height was at least several tens of meters, equivalent to 3 or 4 stories. An ordinary person would at least break both legs even if they survived. But Lu Yuan just jumped straight down, with tremendous force. The ground beneath him was about to shatter. But Lu Yuan didn't stop. He continued downward, moving like an ape across the jagged rocks and treacherous terrain of Longhu Mountain, especially with the surrounding thorns and weeds. This was something no ordinary person could do. But to him, it was nothing. Lu Yuan's skin was tough. Even a blade would only leave a mark, let alone thorns. Under the dim moonlight in the darkness, a figure kept leaping across the cliffs. Each landing stirred up dust, and the rocks beneath his feet exploded. This power surpassed human limits. Truly terrifying. In this way, a journey that would take an ordinary person over an hour took Lu Yuan only a dozen minutes leaping across the cliffs to reach the mountain gate. Ahead was his car parked during the day. After placing the wordless stele inside, he felt a little relieved. Tomorrow, he just needed to find an excuse to leave. Then Lu Yuan turned to go back up the mountain. But at that very moment, in an instant, rays of light pierced the darkness, dyeing the clouds golden. A golden brilliance flooded the sky, incredibly bright. Within a radius of several kilometers, everything turned from night to day, very bright, comparable to sunlight. What's happening? Seeing this, Lu Yuan's heart stirred, and he looked closely. All the light seemed to emanate from the Heavenly Master's mansion. Faintly visible within that glow were 2 massive silhouettes blotting out the sky, a white tiger and a golden dragon, standing proudly in the void, accompanied by faint roars, a tiger's roar and a dragon's cry. At once the birds on Longhu Mountain, as if startled by something, flapped their wings and flew away. To escape this place, could the mutation be coming early? Seeing this manifestation, Lu Yuan began to speculate. This phenomenon was too astonishing, like a myth appearing before him. But soon when he tried to investigate further, he saw the white tiger and golden dragon ascend into the sky and vanish without a trace. At the same time, all the light dissipated. Everything returned to calm, as if nothing had happened. It's not the mutation, but something major must be happening at the Heavenly Master's mansion. Lu Yuan said to himself. Then without further thought, he began climbing the mountain, since there was no one around. So he now moved freely. With one step he crossed dozens of meters, then pretended nothing was wrong and lay down. He knew that, after such an event, the Heavenly Master's mansion would certainly react. Mount Tai and Mount Jahua had their anomalies. Longhu Mountain, as the birthplace of Taoism, was naturally among them, only slightly later. And all of this was the prelude to the mutation. Just waiting for that day to come, everything would become different. A new era would begin. Lying on the bed, Lu Yuan pondered. His past life experiences brought many things to mind, and he knew deep down that besides the wordless Stella, Longhu Mountain held many other divine objects, and even various powerful inheritances, which was why it could stand firm in the new era and occupy an important position. If he took his time patiently, he could certainly find many good things. But he didn't have that much time now, and even if he did, he had no way to find them. The Heavenly Master's mansion was very mysterious, like the young Heavenly Master Chun Yang and Yu Yang Zhenren, who seemed like ordinary people, yet over 90 years old. With remarkable stamina, stronger than young people, they were certainly not simple. Not to mention there was also an old Heavenly Master, so he had to be very careful. At least until the mutation arrived, caution was key. If he attracted attention, the trouble would be great. Although he had now surpassed ordinary people, he still couldn't withstand firearms. With these thoughts, Lu Yuan waited for time to pass. Soon the third day arrived. A young Taoist came and invited Lu Yuan to the Heavenly Master's mansion. Director Lu and the others were also there, but didn't know what had happened. Yet clearly they had also noticed the anomaly last night. They asked the young Taoists nearby, but in the end, the answers were not satisfactory. The Taoists of the Heavenly Master's mansion remained silent on the matter. Finally, Yu Yang Zhenren arrived. He first thanked Lu Yuan and the others for their donations, which the Heavenly Master's mansion would always remember. Then he announced that from today onward, Longhu Mountain would officially be closed. All outsiders must leave the mountain as soon as possible, including venues where lay Buddhist practice centers are established here. But Yu Yang Zhenren added one final note. If conditions allow in the future, the Heavenly Master's mansion would offer compensation, such as some form of protection. This left Director Lu and the others puzzled. They all had a certain status and position. As long as they didn't break the law, what protection would they need? And even if they did, could the Heavenly Master's mansion provide it? So they had many questions. And Yu Yang Zhenren answered seriously. But when it came to last night's anomaly, he could only say he didn't know, speaking vaguely. But they clearly didn't want to discuss it further. There was no point in staying, so Lu Yuan was the first to leave. The mutation was about to descend. He should also speed up. On the highway, Lu Yuan drove forward. In the trunk, the wordless Stella lay quietly. Longhu Mountain was changing. Everyone was busy. It was now August 10th. About 20 days remained until the mutation, and the meteor shower on the outskirts of Wuzhou should occur around the 20th. He should make it in time. Lu Yuan's next plan after saying this was to head to the farm he had bought on the outskirts of Wuzhou. The meteorite contained a celestial sword embryo, a truly supreme divine object. Fortunately, Wuzhou wasn't far from Gucheng. He could return quickly after obtaining it. While planning, Lu Yuan turned on the car radio to see if there was any latest news. But obviously, all information about the mutation seemed to be blocked. Each channel was normal, either broadcasting traffic conditions or playing music. Of course, there were occasional snippets, like a group of hikers climbing a mountain, finding the journey longer than before. Originally needing 2 days, it took a full week in the end, as if the earth had stretched. At a certain village, with lush vegetation, curious villagers entered and disappeared, never to return. Then there were rumors about Lop Nur. In ancient times it was a marshland, but after thousands of years it had completely dried up, stretching endlessly. Finally, drones lost contact and crashed, so there were no specific images. All kinds of strange things kept happening, one after another, but most of the information was fragmented, hard to connect. So even when it made the news, few people paid sustained attention, chasing the next hot topic instead. The closer the time, the more variables there are. Lu Yuan sighed as he listened to the news. Fortunately, he had prepared from the start. Otherwise, it would be hard to adapt to the new era. Then he turned off the news and focused on driving. From Longhu Mountain to Wuzhou took 7 or 8 hours, so he didn't plan to rest. But strangely, he found the journey seemed longer. Just like the tour group, many vehicles along the way ran out of fuel and had to stop on the side waiting for rescue. But Lu Yuan had come fully prepared. So after more than 10 hours of continuous driving, he reached his destination. Mr. Lu, you really acted fast. You know, not long after you bought my farm, a big company came, saying they wanted to buy it at a higher price. On a large farm on the outskirts of Wuzhou, 2 figures walked forward. One of them, a middle-aged man, spoke. But by then I had already signed the contract with you, so I directly refused. He had dark skin and wasn't tall, but looked very shrewd. Even if Mr. Zhang hadn't refused this land, you couldn't have sold it either. Lu Yuan said calmly. He understood what the other party meant. But by then, the property rights were already his. Now he just felt he had lost out and wanted to gain a little more. Mr. Lu, I was just joking. Come, let me show you around again. Mr. Zhang was seen through and laughed awkwardly, trying to change the subject, while inwardly regretting he could have waited a little longer and made a bigger profit. Who knew it would turn out this way? But regret was useless now. The contract was already signed. The farm now belonged to Lu Yuan. The farm wasn't very large, about 30 to 40 acres. After all, Wuzhou was a big city. Even the land in the suburbs was expensive. But in recent years, the market wasn't good. So the owner had given up and chosen to sell, and it fell into Lu Yuan's hands. Mr. Lu, that's the villa I built myself. Though small, the decor is good. You can stay there sometime if you like. Mr. Zhang introduced many things. Since it was already done, he might as well be enthusiastic. Maybe if he left a good impression on Mr. Lu, he might think of him when there was a profitable business. Lu Yuan had already seen that house, and nodded, thinking he could stay there for the next few days, and quietly wait for the meteorite to fall, to obtain it as soon as possible. After the handover procedures were completed, Mr. Zhang left, because the final payment would be transferred to his account. Lu Yuan tidied up the room, and moved the wordless stele inside. Such precious things should be kept in sight until he returned home, to prevent loss. In the following days, he basically stayed in the house, and didn't go anywhere. But he didn't forget to train and strengthen his body. Now all he needed to do was fully absorb the medicinal effects. In doing so, his physical attributes would continue to improve. But during this time, when he tried to look carefully, there was no trace. At first he thought it was just his imagination, but later he directly dismissed that. After all, his senses were now extraordinary, and to some extent, he could sense danger. The problem was that he clearly sensed something wrong, but couldn't find it. Very strange. Previously, Mr. Lu had said that after signing the contract, a big company had approached him, but hadn't succeeded. Could the people I sense be from that company? Lu Yuan thought of this possibility, but couldn't be sure. If they were just ordinary people, within a limited range, they couldn't escape his tracking, unless they were awakened ones. But the mutation hadn't happened yet. Such beings shouldn't exist. And if someone was around, what was their purpose? Could they also know about the celestial sword embryo in the meteorite? Lu Yuan had many questions but no answers. In the end, he stopped thinking, and chose to ignore them. Whatever the reason, when the meteorite fell, everything would be clear. So in the following days, Lu Yuan remained as usual, barely going out, while hiding his true strength. Even if the feeling of being watched persisted, he paid it no mind. Soon, August 21st arrived. According to his memory, today was the day the meteorite would fall. Lu Yuan was fully prepared, ready to act at any moment. But suspecting someone was watching him, he chose to lie low. At dusk, the farm villa stood quietly, in the setting sun's afterglow, shining with golden light. The farm had been abandoned for some time, so the weeds had grown tall. As the land gradually fell into darkness, everything around was pitch black. For an ordinary person walking through it, it was hard to spot anything beyond a few meters. That young man in the villa isn't simple. He almost detected our presence. You're overthinking it. No matter how capable, he's still just an ordinary person, right? Haven't you seen? He hasn't moved at all these past few days. At this moment in the overgrown weeds, 3 figures crouched and moved slowly, very carefully, as if afraid of being discovered. They wore black tactical gear, each holding a compound crossbow, with a cold gleam. Compound crossbows were powerful, and could fire repeatedly. If used for hunting, even wild boars and bears would be killed. Their power even exceeded some small firearms, and were strictly prohibited, yet they held them in their hands. In my opinion, we don't need to be so cautious. Even if we're discovered, we'll just shoot him. One of them spoke, a short man, but with a fierce tone, not valuing human life at all. Nonsense. The leader frowned. The timing is too sensitive right now. We've been ordered not to cause casualties. Otherwise, it would be hard to handle. Although they had deep backing, they still had to be careful, especially since this wasn't deep in the mountains. Killing someone would leave traces. They mustn't act rashly unless absolutely necessary. I was just saying. The man lowered his head and didn't speak again, but his eyes remained fierce, like a viper. The leader didn't press further. He raised his wrist and checked the time. According to the company's prediction, the meteorite should fall around this hour. When it does, remember, don't hesitate. Just grab the thing and leave. The mission will be complete. Understood. Several replied, and asked curiously, we're just one of the teams for this mission. That's right. Captain Zhao nodded. There should be over 100 teams. But some meteorites burn up upon entering the atmosphere, due to friction, and disappear. We don't know if we'll be lucky enough to see one fall to Earth. If we're lucky, we won't have to worry for the rest of our lives. This man clearly knew more, understanding that the company valued this mission highly. Otherwise, they wouldn't have used so many resources. Over 100 teams. Someone exclaimed in surprise. Who exactly is our company's boss? He knew that just his own team alone, not to mention the personnel, the equipment alone, was worth over $1 million. With over 100 identical teams combined, wouldn't that cost hundreds of millions? Don't ask about things you shouldn't, otherwise you won't even know how you died. Captain Zhao scolded, clearly deeply zihui about this, not wanting to discuss it further, because in the end, their group were just thugs trained by the company. In ancient times, that would be like servants. A servant inquiring about the master's affairs. Wasn't that suicide? Yes. I won't ask. Hearing this, the man knew he had crossed the line, and dared not say more. The others also shrank their necks, then focused their attention ahead. Of course, they didn't forget to watch the villa nearby, ready to act at the first sign of trouble. At the same time, inside the villa, Lu Yuan had already turned off the lights, sitting alone on the living room sofa. This was the last day. If the target was the meteorite, then those hiding in the shadows would surely make their move tonight. Looking at the fully darkened sky, he murmured to himself. By now, Lu Yuan was certain that there were people on the farm, and their target wasn't him. The reasoning was simple. If it were, these people would have acted long ago, not kept waiting. So the only explanation was the meteorite. He knew that certain forces had extraordinary means, using modern technology to observe the stars. The question now was, did that mysterious force know about the celestial sword embryo? And if they were ordinary people, why couldn't he find them with his current abilities? As he pondered this, time passed by. Soon it was 8 in the evening. The moonlight was bright. The stars shone brilliantly, as peaceful as usual. But no one knew how long had passed. The night began to brighten. Beams of fire appeared suddenly, streaking across the night sky, accompanied by thunderous roars, like fighter jets passing by. Deafening. Looking up, there were tens of thousands of meteors, dense as raindrops. At this moment, the scene was somewhat beautiful, yet also somewhat terrifying, because most meteors, upon entering the atmosphere, would completely burn up due to friction. But some of them actually broke through into the stratosphere. Among them, one meteorite fell straight down, though small. It was very fast. If it struck the Earth, the impact force would be comparable to a small bomb, but they didn't move, clearly knowing that getting too close would threaten their own safety. Boom! Finally, with a violent roar, the meteorite struck the ground, creating a fireball with a radius of over 10 meters, causing the surrounding weeds to catch fire, less than a kilometer from us. Let's go. Upon seeing this, the leader gave the order. Their mission was simple, to recover the meteorite immediately. So upon hearing the order, they didn't hesitate at all, and rushed out, very fast, surpassing ordinary people. And the three moved nimbly, seemingly unafraid of the wildfires. They charged straight in. It turned out their clothes had special fireproof and cooling properties. Soon the three reached the destination. Due to the meteor impact, in the center of the crater lay a stone emitting heat, surrounded by magma. The stone wasn't big, about the size of a soccer ball, with a pitted surface. But if you looked closely, you could see faint golden light flickering inside. We're so lucky. We actually got a real meteorite to bring back. The company will surely reward us handsomely. Captain Zhao was excited upon seeing this. He hadn't held high hopes initially, but now it was different. They said there were 100 teams, but how many would actually secure a meteorite? So the three of them would definitely be promoted, and the company would invest heavily in them. The other two were also overjoyed, and immediately prepared to go down, to retrieve the meteorite. But at that moment, a young voice suddenly rang out. You all want to take something from my land without even greeting me. That's very impolite of you. What? The three were shocked, and quickly turned around. They had all undergone various training and life and death struggles. Now someone had approached them silently. They knew this person was definitely not ordinary, and guessed he might be sent by a rival company. But soon they were taken aback when they got a clear look. Before them was a young man in his early 20s, dressed ordinarily with nothing special, just looking at them with a smile. It's him. One of them recognized the newcomer. He was the owner of this farm. The other two also breathed a sigh of relief. If he was just an ordinary person, there was nothing to worry about. The reason they hadn't noticed him earlier was probably because their attention was focused on the meteorite. Kid, I suggest you pretend you didn't see anything tonight, and you might keep your life. Finally, Captain Zhao spoke, his tone unfriendly. Although the company had ordered secrecy, he didn't want to cause a death. If the other party would just leave, he could let it go. You're trying to steal from my place, and you still want me to leave. Lu Yuan looked at the three, and couldn't help but laugh. He hadn't chosen to act immediately, wanting to find out who these people were. He had naturally noticed the compound crossbows in their hands, and was somewhat alarmed. After all, those things were powerful, expensive, and strictly prohibited. Clearly, their identities weren't simple, so he had to get to the bottom of it. Your thing. Upon hearing this, they mocked. This is a meteorite that fell from the sky. How could it be yours? Leave now, or don't blame us for being rude. Their patience was limited, and they didn't want to waste words. Their hands quietly moved to the arrow quivers on their backs, threatening Lu Yuan to leave now. Since it fell on my farm, it's mine. Lu Yuan shook his head, with no intention of leaving. Stop wasting time with him. The short man's eyes were full of killing intent. Just kill him. Fine, but make it clean. Captain Zhao nodded. Since he was asking for death, they couldn't be blamed. Then he ignored it, and prepared to get the meteorite with the other man, to avoid any delay. As for Lu Yuan, in his eyes he was already dead. Receiving the order, the short man licked his lips. Go. He moved swiftly and smoothly. The crossbow could fire repeatedly, with extremely high damage, far beyond ordinary bows. So the moment it was loaded, he looked at Lu Yuan with eyes not just cruel, but also pitying an ordinary person, who had no idea what he was facing. He could have lived, but chose to die. The next moment, the short man didn't hesitate, and fired a burst at Lu Yuan. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The bolts flew out, with a whistling sound and a cold gleam. But Lu Yuan didn't retreat. Facing the incoming bolts, he stood still, and simply raised his hand. The man laughed at the sight. How foolish. The compound crossbow's bolts, and he actually tried to catch them with his hand, but then his smile froze, because the bolts he had just fired were actually caught in his hand. How is that possible? The short man's heart shook violently, as if he'd seen a ghost. But after doing that, Lu Yuan simply dropped the bolts and took a step forward, closing the dozens of meters in an instant, before his stunned opponent could react. With no extra movement, he gave a gentle slap. There was no choice. With his current physique, it was more than any human could bear. If he used any more force, he would crush the other's head. Smack. Lu Yuan's palm landed on the short man's head. Instantly, blood gushed from his mouth and nose. He staggered backward and fell. Not good. His tough take him together. Seeing this, Captain Zhao immediately knew his opponent wasn't simple. They fired crossbow bolts from 2 different directions. Whoosh, 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 dozens of bolts flew out. Lu Yuan didn't even glance at them, and casually sidestepped to dodge. Although the distance was only about 10 meters, he had now surpassed human limits in every way. These bolts were too slow in his eyes. Damn it, he moved fast and closed in. Captain Zhao clearly had sufficient combat experience. Seeing the crossbow was useless, he changed tactics, and drew 2 daggers from his waist with his teammate, charging in immediately. The short man had also recovered by then, dazed and confused. But to end it quickly, he also joined in. Quick reactions. Lu Yuan smiled. Facing the 3 closing in, he decided to stop holding back. The next moment he stepped forward, appearing beside the short man. Then he formed a fist, and struck his chest. Bang, crack, crack. The force was too great, that the short man's ribs shattered completely. His body flew back 20 meters, his head lolled to the side lifeless. He felt nothing about killing someone who wanted him dead. In his previous life, he had struggled in the new era of the strong preying on the weak for over a decade, witnessing true cruelty. What happened before him was nothing. This man is wrong. Captain Zhao saw his subordinate killed in one blow, and immediately judged they were outmatched, ready to retreat. After all, his life was more important, but Lu Yuan didn't give him the chance. He was too fast. Instantly closing in on the other man, another punch. The man's shoulder was hit, sending him crashing into the ground, creating a huge crater, and he never got up again. In less than 3 seconds, he had taken out 2 people. Then he looked at the last remaining Captain Zhao, and said softly, "Speak. Who sent you, and what is your purpose?" Trying to get information from me. Dream on the other's expression changed, seeming unwilling to talk, quite stubborn. Lu Yuan smiled, and quickly approached. Clearly they came for the meteorite, but he didn't know if they knew about the celestial sword embryo. Otherwise there was no need to keep the last one alive. After all, this matter was important. If they did know, he would need to be more careful in the future. Being watched was never comfortable. Lu Yuan was extremely fast, so much so that the air around him whistled. Clearly a powerful force was building within him. I'll risk it. Captain Zhao's body trembled, but quickly calmed down. Then he took a white pill from his waist and swallowed it directly. Gurgle, that was the sound of flesh and bones writhing. Now Captain Zhao's height had swollen to a full 2 meters. At the same time, his right arm began to expand. The muscles on it were thicker than a millstone, veins bulging. White steam emanated from his body. His eyes were bloodshot, completely inhuman. Even Lu Yuan was surprised. 2 meters tall with bulging muscles, especially that right arm, like a thick stone pillar. Even from a distance, he could feel the power contained within. I'm burning my life force. Taking a forbidden drug, my power is dozens of times greater than normal. Now that you've seen me like this, you're dead for sure. Captain Zhao still had some reason, but his gaze at Lu Yuan was savage, like a wild beast. Yet his words had already condemned him to death, because his current strength was beyond any ordinary person's comparison. Even if a world champion stood before him, he was confident he could kill him instantly. In this state, his defense speed and power were terrifyingly strong. After speaking, he didn't waste any more words, and directly attacked. The ground beneath his feet was crushed into a large crater. His right arm pulled back to gather power. Then he smashed it down at Lu Yuan. This punch was very strong, even producing a sonic boom. If a normal person was hit, their body would turn into bloody mush. Comparing strength, Lu Yuan narrowed his eyes and stood still. He bent his legs and similarly gathered power in his fist. Facing that massive arm, he struck directly. The elixir essence from the Meridian Furnace had reached a level comparable to an awakened one. Even if the opponent was in a strange state, he was still flesh and blood. So in terms of physique, he had absolute confidence. More importantly, he had lived 2 lives. Both his combat experience and various aspects were extraordinary. The next moment, the 2 fists collided. A loud sound rang out, echoing around them. The clash of their forces even stirred up a wave of air. The ground around them kept cracking. One could imagine how great that force was. But Lu Yuan's body didn't waver at all, maintaining his original posture. In contrast, Captain Zhao's eyes were full of shock. His right arm, due to the excessive force, had its burst blood vessels rupturing. How is this possible? Is this guy even human? Captain Zhao was shocked, full of disbelief. He had taken the drug to gain this power. But what about the other party? He looked like an ordinary person. Did you use all your strength? At this moment, Lu Yuan suddenly spoke, continuing, "Now it's my turn." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned his fist into a palm, then grabbed Captain Zhao's fist. and directly executed a shoulder throw. Boom boom. The 2-meter tall giant was effortlessly thrown to the ground. The terrifying force cracked the earth inch by inch, forming a crater dozens of meters wide. Captain Zhao couldn't bear it, continuously spitting blood from his mouth, his body trembling. He tried to struggle up, using his strongest right arm to temporarily repel the enemy. But Lu Yuan applied a little force with his wrist. With a crack, he had held back. The gap was truly too great. Now, do you have anything to say? Lu Yuan looked at him and said calmly, he didn't know what that pill was, but at best, it was just modern technology. As for himself, he had merged with the elixir essence left by an immortal. You, what are you? Why do you have such power? Captain Zhao was in pain all over, but more than that he was afraid. This person before him was too strong. He had taken the company's drug, yet was still no match, easily defeated and subdued. While full of questions, he concluded that the person before him wasn't human at all. I didn't ask that. Lu Yuan shook his head. My question from before. Then he stepped on another of his ribs. He was not soft-hearted. If he didn't get an answer, he wouldn't hold back. And Captain Zhao, seeing the coldness in Lu Yuan's eyes, knew he wasn't joking. Gritting his teeth, he still spoke. Then you have to guarantee my life. That depends on whether what you say interests me. Lu Yuan replied, fine. Captain Zhao stopped struggling and said directly, I'm from Eternal Gene, a special combat personnel they trained. The purpose this time was to collect extraterrestrial meteorites and bring them back to the company. The higher-ups valued this greatly. He now revealed everything he knew, including the number of teams collecting meteorites and so on. In short, the company behind him had long formulated a related plan. They had originally planned to buy this farm, but someone else got it first, so they acted in secret. Eternal Gene. Lu Yuan frowned upon hearing this. As far as he knew, this was a major domestic company with great influence, but the identity of its controller was very mysterious, unknown to outsiders. And Eternal Gene, as the name implied, studied life genetics, said to have many patents, with great achievements. He had heard of it before, and they would also spend a large sum of money to specially invite very elderly people to explore the truth of longevity. In Lu Yuan's memory, after the global mutation, Eternal Gene also rose rapidly, occupying a place in the chaotic early new era, with many awakened ones under its command. It was a force not to be ignored. It seemed Eternal Gene had also realized this, and had started preparing long ago, otherwise they couldn't have produced a large number of awakened ones out of thin air, he murmured to himself. Understanding the cause and effect, no wonder this man gained inhuman power after taking a pill. That was probably one of that company's research results. Anything else? Pausing, Lu Yuan continued to ask. The company ordered us to evacuate immediately after getting the meteorite, saying that many people were watching it, including Wuzhou Group, Tiantian Technology and Beidou Biology and so on. Captain Zhao dared not hide anything. Good grief. Not only were they all top domestic enterprises, but also hegemon-level forces after the mutation. Hearing this, Lu Yuan further confirmed his guess. The global mutation, certain upper-class figures not only knew about it, but had also started preparing long ago. Perhaps this world was far more mysterious than imagined, and the familiar Wuzhou Group reached out quite far, actually setting their sights on him. I've told you everything I know. You promised to let me go. Seeing Lu Yuan silent, Captain Zhao spoke up. Lu Yuan came back to his senses, releasing his grip on the other. A smile began to appear on his face. You did well, but you still deserve to die. With that, he clenched his right fist and punched Captain Zhao in the face. Boom. The ground cracked again, and Captain Zhao's body was completely sunk in, never to crawl out again. His expression was calm. All done. Time to leave. Without another word, he walked straight to where the meteorite had fallen. It was a large crater, still emitting heat. In the center was an irregular stone, with a pitted surface showing no special features. Then he crouched down and picked it up. He could feel the heat emanating from it. It nurtures an innate divine artifact within it, which he had to obtain. Originally, Lu Yuan planned to rest for a night after getting it, but after hearing the relevant information from Captain Zhao, he fell into thought. Many major forces had noticed this meteor shower, and had already begun to act. Aside from the one in his hand, most meteorites had disappeared upon entering the atmosphere, and even those that fell contained nothing inside. So they would surely continue to investigate in secret. Lu Yuan thought those major forces had strong means. His purchase of the farm would definitely be discovered. If he just took the meteorite away directly, it would be hard to avoid raising their suspicion. There was no choice. He couldn't tamper with the crater, and in the final days, he didn't want any accidents. So after a brief thought, Lu Yuan didn't hesitate, and directly broke the meteorite apart. Instantly, black powder fell to the ground. Soon most of the meteorite was shattered, leaving only the center part. It was a palm-sized black sword embryo, but very rough, showing no special features. But the embryo was very heavy, yet for some reason, it would appear and disappear intermittently, as if sealed. Lu Yuan knew this was because heaven and earth hadn't yet mutated, and it hadn't fully awakened. When the time came, it would reveal unimaginable power, sweeping across the world. Its sword cutting through the heavens, dominating the universe. He'd also witnessed it from afar back then. After that sword was struck, the sword light surged, even overshadowing the sun's radiance, as if it could cut down stars, and the enemies under that sword were instantly annihilated. It could be described as a sword that breaks through the 9 heavens. So this sword embryo had another name, the Great Luo Sword Embryo. Time to go. Lu Yuan collected himself and placed the sword embryo in his bosom. He had completely crushed the meteorite. Even if those major forces had doubts, they would first study the powder. He was just an ordinary person and wouldn't attract much attention, even if they reacted later. By then, the heaven and earth mutation would have already begun. Soon Lu Yuan returned to the farm villa, took out the wordless stele, and drove away directly. Tonight would certainly be chaotic. Staying here would likely bring endless trouble. Better to leave altogether. And as he predicted, less than an hour after he left, another group of people appeared on the farm. These people were dressed in black, with sharp eyes. The difference was that they had firearms in their hands. Their combat power was more ferocious, and when they saw the crater, and the dead Captain Zhao and the others, they immediately realized they were from Eternal Gene.